Hello, welcome to the Doomed Wyvern Gaming Guild series of videos about Hyperborea RPG, which is the third edition of Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea, which was very, I think, cleverly just cut down to Hyperborea. It's a lot easier to say. I talked a bit about some of these combat options in another video, but I thought I would go through each and every one of them and kind of make a shorter video just about these more advanced combat options. So there's combat options and then advanced combat options. So we're going to start here. You're probably going to start hearing fireworks because it's the 4th and people get started early here in Idaho. All right, combat options. The following combat options should be announced during action declaration before dicing the initiative, like a dicing initiative. So essentially what it's saying is that when you declare your actions, whether they fall into melee, missiles, magic, or movement, you need to declare which sort of combat option you're doing. Probably most of them are going to be like melee oriented, but maybe not all of them. So let's take a look at some of these. So once the intent is declared and the order of events established, action resolution may then commence. So a charge attack, right? So we understand generally what this is from other systems. Basically, you're moving at your full movement and making an attack with a melee weapon. This action is a single attack, so 1/1. Anytime you see like 1/1, it just means like one attack over one turn, so one attack per round. Whereas like 3/2 would be 3 attacks over a period of 2 rounds, which in this system would be like 1 attack the first round and then 2 attacks the second round and then 1 attack and then 2 attacks, so forth. So to charge attack must be reasonably straightforward. So you can't like zigzag or do a U-turn when you're charging. You got to charge straightforward more or less and cover a minimum distance of 15 feet. A charge attack cannot be across an unreasonable terrain per referee discretion. So you're not doing this over like boulders where you don't get the momentum of your charge because you have to stop and jump over a boulder or duck under a downed tree or something. You pretty much have to charge over more or less open ground. And by doing so, you can increase your bonus damage by 2, but you would have a -2 to your AC penalty for 1 round. And since this is a descending AC system where lower AC is better, what that actually means is your AC is effectively up by 2 or worse by 2. Note here that if the optional last strike rule is being used, a combatant's charging distance can be doubled. However, the charge occurs at the end of the round. So we covered this last strike rule in a different video, but just to kind of note that that there are a couple of optional rules. I think the first strike one is really great, and we will be using this. The last strike one essentially just gives you another option for moving and attacking, but moving further and doing it at the end of the round once everyone else has taken all of their actions. Please let me know, people who've actually played this game thoroughly, let me know if I'm getting any of this wrong. I'm trying to kind of learn these and internalize these for benefit of my players as we're just starting our first foray into the Hyperborean world and system. Fighting withdrawal, we covered in detail in another video. It was a little rambly because I think I was still figuring it out. So essentially, fighting withdrawal is the equivalent, more or less, of like disengage, although it's not like a separate action, so to speak. So essentially, you can backpedal out of an engagement that you're in, out of a melee engagement, at half movement and still get an attack, or you can backpedal at full movement and simply defend. That is, not get an attack. And then you're comparing movement rates to see if the combatant can keep up with you if it wants to. So there's 2 examples here. One in which let's say the good guys or your party goes second, so the bad guys are going first. So that's that a huntsman is engaged with a bog mummy. The huntsman is heavily wounded and decides to backpedal. The bog mummy wins initiative, so it gets its attack first, swinging its fist. And so that would be during the melee phase of combat, which happens first. Anyone doing a stationary melee attack will resolve that action first. So the huntsman luckily deflects the blow with his shield, and then he withdraws. Then the bog mummy withdraws. Sorry, I'm misreading this. So the huntsman deflects the blow with his shield. So the bog mummy didn't land his attack. Bog mummy went first, missed. Huntsman deflects the blow with his shield, and then he begins to draw while thrusting his spear at the pursuing bog mummy, which essentially is, in mechanics talk, is he took an attack and then moved back half of his movement value, or half of his full speed. So if his full speed is 40, he was able to move back 20. So meantime, the bog mummy manages to pursue only 10 feet. So what this means is that, and how this actually plays out like turn by turn and on whose turn these things are happening, since the bog mummy won the initiative, and initiative in this game is, bad guys and good guys, or one side and the other, and everyone on one side goes, and then everyone on the other side goes in the order of melee, missile, magic, movement. What this means is that the bog mummy's team already went, and then Huntsman on his side stabs with his spear and tries to backpedal. What this then affords the bog mummy to do is actually pursue by half of its movement the huntsman, even though the bog mummy's turn is already over. And the reason he can do that is because on any given turn, he could have taken the move half and attack action, and not just the stationary attack action. And so the equivalent there is that he's got a half a move kind of left over, and the trigger for him to be able to move and try to pursue the huntsman is that the huntsman backpedaled away, or he did a fighting withdrawal. And if it took me a while to kind of wrap my mind around this, because it's like one person goes and their turn's over, then how can they move again? And this is sort of like how it was explained to me. So if you have a better description or a better analogy or correction for me, I'm all ears. Again, we're all new to this system. And another example here is where actually the good guys win initiative. So the cleric, in this case, fighting a minotaur. So the cleric decides to make a full withdrawal, right? So your options are backpedal at half movement and still get an attack, or full movement and no attack. So the cleric just wants to get out of there, is doing a full withdrawal, but is wearing plate mail. And plate mail essentially puts a cap on your total movement value that you can move. Base movement value for the average humanoid in Hyperborea is 40 feet in a 10-second round. And so wearing plate mail, however, brings this cleric down to only 20 at a full movement. So it's moving half the speed of an unarmored person. So the Minotaur, however, has a full 40-foot movement and really only needs to move half of his movement to catch up with the cleric. So he can still get an attack because, again, move half your movement and attack. And so that's how actually in this example I'd say is a lot clearer because the cleric goes and then the Minotaur goes. So there's no, sort of this like triggering a pursuit from the bog mummy the way that it is in the first example, where it was the bog mummy's turn, the huntsman's turn, and then the bog mummy moves up. Whereas this one, it's like cleric's team goes, he backpedals, the Minotaur's team then goes and is keeping up with the cleric, in fact, because he has enough movement at his half movement speed to keep up with the armored cleric and still get an attack. Okay, let's move on. So there are, flask hurling, oil burning, whether there are grenades. This is weird science fantasy, and there are sort of archaic technology elements. So you will find reference to like grenades or ray guns or sort of different things like that, or maybe some archaic piece of alien or ancient technology that you hurl and has a radiation splash of some kind. And so this is, but your basic example is like flaming oil. And so how this would work then is you're hurling these things like a grenade, holy water, oil, etc. can be hurled to strike a target with a hurled flask. A d20 is rolled and compared to the following table. So if it's a stationary target, an unaware person, pretty easy to hit them, right? So what's interesting about this is you'll notice it's just like a table for flask hurling. It's not so much like a different kind of attack on its own. But there are modifiers that apply here, right? So if you're good at throwing or shooting per your dexterity, then you're going to be better at this. So the table tells us that a stationary target's 7 to hit. A large target obviously would be easier to hit if he's over 8 foot tall, 9, and then so on and so forth. The smaller target's harder to hit. So the adjustments you would make to this roll, of which you would need to get the equal to the number or over, on a die 20 would be a dexterity attack modifier. So if you're pretty dexterous, the 15 to 16 I think is +1 to ranged attacks. You add 1 to that in your attempt to get over the score, or equal to or over the score. And then your range would apply right? So every ranged or hurled or missile weapon has a 3 range increments here, short, medium, and long. Short has no penalty whatsoever. Medium has a -2 to hit penalty, and long has a -5 to hit penalty. And so you would apply this to your roll and check the result against the table. So what else? I haven't really covered this one in detail, but I think these are just sort of descriptions of the kinds of things you might be throwing and how they splash and affect someone. And apologies if I don't go through every single little rule. I just kind of cover it until I'm satisfied with my understanding, base level understanding, and my interest level. So I just keep moving on. Mounted combat. So the province of the skilled horseman. I think a cataphract is an interesting class because they have a lot of. I think they're the only class that has like specific benefits to mounted combat. I always love the notion of mounted combat. As an aside, I always love the notion of mounted combat, and it doesn't. But I don't often get a chance to engage with that in the games that I'm playing these days. Let's say so much of that ends up being like in a dungeon or in some sort of close quarters, combat situation where you wouldn't be on a horse in a back alley or a tavern or something. So would like to try to engage with a bit more of these kind of mounted charge, mounted combat type things. Don't have a cataphract in my current army, my current player group. Right now they're running a warlock, a bard, an assassin, and a magician, the principal class magician. And so we probably won't see a lot of mounted combat, but I digress. So the following weapons are suited. So there's only specific weapons that are really suited to mounted combat. Obviously a horseman's flail, which is something you can get around a shield, I believe, a horseman's hammer, etc. So attacking a small or medium opponent from the saddle is considered higher ground. So you're literally above the person. You could get higher ground bonus by being on a higher stair than someone at the bottom stair, or attacking from a ledge just above someone. It improves your ability to hit them. But this effectively it becomes higher ground. However, this bonus is negated if the mounted combatant wields a weapon not suited to fighting from the saddle. Again, see this list. Similarly, a horseman gains +1 AC versus the footman. So plenty of benefit from being on the mounted. Yeah, I mean, some of you might be more used to like 3rd edition D&D, 5th edition even, where +1 AC or even +1 to hit is not very impressive. But you have to keep in mind that a lot of these like old school inspired games like Hyperborea, the total bonus or total modifier curve is pretty flat. Like you have to roll really high stats to actually have anything more than like a +1 to, let's say, strength, melee attacks. You've got to get a 15 just to get a +1, and even 17 is +1 to attack modifier. Which I think in 5th edition, even 12 will give you a +1, and 2, 3, 4, 5, I think at 20 maybe. So at 18 strength, really hard to roll, and you're still only getting a +2. So having a +1 to attack, anytime you can get that is great. And the same thing with +1 AC, also great, especially how deadly this game is. That's the other thing to keep in mind. Hit points, relatively low, and any AC bonus you can get is gold. Mounted charge. So a horseman can make a mounted charge if the target is at least 60 feet away and the path is relatively straight. So it's going to be like a charge in that you've got to go a certain amount of distance and it needs to be pretty much straight path. The ground must be level and free of obstructions, similar to regular mount, like on foot charge. And the mounted charge cannot be performed in difficult terrains, etc., etc. So these are the benefits. +1 to hit versus small and medium opponents. If it's someone who's large, is basically as tall as your horse or taller than you on your horse, you're not going to get that benefit. +2 to damage, always good. -2 to AC. You're charging headlong, sort of into the fray and not really paying attention to anything except that one singular target. So it makes sense that you'd not be, that you have a little bit of penalty to AC. If the mounted charger wields a lance or couches a great spear, which couches just means sort of like tucks it into maybe like a hip or the under his arm, something like this. If I think there's actually, I don't know what they're called, but I think there's a lance couch type thing that knights of yore would actually have on their person or on their horse, where they literally tuck it in. It's designed for that, and to help with the physics of that and absorbing the blow, making it a sturdier attack. So if they do that, the weapon damage dice is doubled or tripled for cataphracts. So that's what I mentioned earlier. They have special abilities on mounts in lieu of the +2 damage. So that's actually really great. So your damage dice are doubled as opposed to just having +2 damage. Other modifiers are then added after the, yep, we understand that. Subsequent, yep, require 2 rounds to prepare. Subsequent mounted charge require 2 rounds to prepare, i.e. a mounted charge may be made every 3rd round if conditions are appropriate. So that's interesting. I think that sort of represents the notion that, like, 2 knights are preparing to, and they joust and sort of pass each other. They kind of need to round their horse and turn back around and get prepared to charge in again. So there's a couple of rounds that go by while doing that, which is interesting. Unarmed combat. It's something I don't find happens a lot. And so, I mean, we'll cover it. But generally you can, find a weapon in hand or have a backup weapon. But essentially, if using the option rule for strike, unarmed weapons are considered 0, weapon class 0. So generally the bigger and heavier the weapon, the higher its class. There are 4 basic unarmed combat forms. Okay, so grapple, overbear, pummel, and push. So let's get into these. I actually have not familiarized myself with these, so bear with me if I get them wrong or if I take too long to grok them. That's just me at 42. Okay, an attempt to wrestle an opponent. A die 20 attack roll is made with strength attack modifier. If the grappler is clad in heavy armor, by grappler do they mean the grappler, right? Not the grapplee. If the grappler is clad in heavy armor, -4 to hit penalty applies. I assume that means if I'm trying to grapple you and I'm wearing armor, not that if I'm trying to grapple you and you're wearing heavy armor, it's harder for me to grapple you. I think that anything sometimes. Upon a successful attack roll, the target is allowed an avoidance saving throw to escape the hold. If the saving throw fails by 5 or more, the grappler can choke the target for 1d2 -1 hit points per round plus strength damage adjustment if applicable. Interesting. A grappled victim is considered hindered and suffers -2 AC penalty. So I took a minute to look up I took a minute to look up hindered, but I ended up reading stunned instead because I realized in another video we were referring to the mesmerize ability of a bard, which is really powerful because it can stun multiple enemies. And so I was looking up stunned. So stunned effect on AC is that it's -4, which is a lot. Again, going back to the overall curve of attack bonuses versus AC targets. And so if we look at, and also, by the way, stunned, they're dazed and bewildered and can do nothing save stagger at half movement. So play a bard, that's what we're saying. So anyway, hindered when grappled, the target is held by one leg or in an otherwise off balance or awkwardly inconvenient position, such as spellcasting. Sorry, you're hindered when you're spellcasting? Sorry. Target is held by one leg or in an otherwise off balance or awkwardly inconvenient position, such as spellcasting. Do you stand on one leg when you cast a spell? Is that what we're saying here? Maybe we're saying that you're so busy doing your gesticulation that you're kind of hindered. So does that mean that when I'm casting a spell, I actually have a -2 to my AC? That doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, to stay on target here, hindered means you've got -2 to your AC. So if we go back to grappled, a grappled victim can break free with a successful strength test of strength or an extraordinary feat of strength versus an 18 strength assailant. In either case, 3 such attempts may be made. If the grappler or grappled victim has no published strength rating, then you can come up with one. A grappled victim may attempt to use a weapon class 0 to 2 weapon at -2 to hit. So if you have like a small in-hand weapon, you can try to attack back. Okay, we'll see if it comes up. We may need to reread that if it comes up. Overbear. An attempt to tackle or pin or restrain an opponent. Die 20 roll is made. Apply your strength attack modifier, if any. Upon successful attack roll, the victim is allowed an avoidance saving throw, right? So you've got to make your attack, hit their AC, and then on top of that, they get an avoidance saving throw. A target with more than 2 legs gains a +1 saving throw per bonus per leg in excess of 2, which is fun, right? So good luck doing this to a spider, giant spider. For every additional overbear hit beyond the first in the same round, the target is penalized by 1 on the saving throw. So I suppose what this is saying is for every overbear hit, meaning you might have 3 of your friends piling on with you, so there would be a penalty of 4 on the saving throw that the person's making to avoid. I think that's what this means. An overborne victim, that is one who fails their saving throw against this overbear attack, is considered prone, which is therefore a -4 AC penalty, which is pretty strong. An overborne victim can escape via a test of strength or an extraordinary when multiple victims are heavier. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So pummel and push. Let's look at these. They're pretty straightforward, it sounds like, but let's see. So a die 20 attack roll with strength for pummeling. A hit causes very little damage plus strength adjustment. And metal gauntlets add +1 to damage, as they should. Makes sense. Okay. In a match of fisticuffs, any hit that exceeds the target's AC, fisticuffs, any hit that exceeds the target AC by 7 or more may result in a knockout, pending a transformation saving throw. If the save fails, the victim is stunned for 1d4 rounds. That's interesting. I probably wouldn't make it kind of so convoluted to be able to knock someone out. I think like a common thing that a lot of GMs do is that if you could easily kill someone, you could easily just say, you know what, instead of killing them, can we just knock them out and take them with? Presumably it's like at the end of the combat and they're maybe the only one left and they're surrounded by all of your buddies. So it's effectively, you could just take someone prisoner. Maybe that's not quite what they're going for here, but I probably wouldn't be looking to compare it. See, if it did it go over by 7, now make a transformation saving throw. I guess I understand how transformation is associated with being knocked out. Nonetheless, that's the option, pummel. Then there is a push option. So an attempt to shove or knock down one's opponent with hands, shoulder, or shield. Sounds cool. Run up, bash them with your shield, maybe push them over a ledge or something. Upon a successful attack roll, the victim is pushed back some number of feet and must make an avoidance saving throw or be knocked down for 1 round. So that's interesting. So they don't get to, you have to hit them first, but then they don't get to save against the feet or the distance they're pushed back, but they must save or be knocked down. And again, if you're prone, that's a -4 AC penalty. So that's a pretty good move if you want to set up a friend to be able to hit them really hard and have a basically +4 bonus to their attack roll. A target with more than 2 legs, yep, we've seen that before, it's harder to knock down. A target that is larger is a bonus, makes sense too. And a knockdown combatant is considered hindered and suffers a -2 penalty. Okay. I see what it's saying. Okay. I may have confused you just then because I interpreted knocked down as prone, but I suppose prone means face down and otherwise not able to defend yourself, whereas this is sort of maybe knocked down on your butt, but you could still parry some attack coming in with your sword or hold up your shield, which is why the AC penalty is less severe than the prone one. Okay, I guess as I talk that through, that makes sense. Let me know if it makes sense to you, or if I'm reading one or all of these wrong. I am now excited to talk about advanced combat actions. So there are a lot of them. There are prerequisites for some of them, most of them, which is cool. I think that makes sense. I should, with higher strength or as a fighter or someone with weapon mastery, I should have available to me more and more a variety of things that I could do in combat. So let's get into these. So arrow setting. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I could see like if you're preparing for an ambush or something, you spike your arrows out. So you can do this actually to gain a faster rate of fire. So one, as an aside, which I'm wont to engage in many asides, the melee weapons, your attack rate with melee weapons is defined entirely by your class and level and whether you have weapon mastery. Generally speaking, most people are going to have 1 attack over 1 round forever. Most classes. But when you use a missile weapon, you could actually be getting a higher rate of fire. I think I'm going the right direction. Yeah, here we go. So take, for example, the short bow. We have an assassin played by our friend Patrick the Elder. He's playing an assassin named Muteos, an Ixian assassin, and he uses a short bow. And even though he's level 1 and doesn't have any kind of weapon mastery, when he uses a short bow, he's able to get 3 attacks every 2 rounds. So the first round will be 1 shot, and then the second round will be 2 shots, and then 1, and then 2 subsequent rounds after that. And that's just purely due to the ability for a person to get off a higher rate of fire for a missile weapon. So that's a little, maybe counterintuitive for people who are used to maybe 5th edition, where your number of attacks are determined entirely by your level and martial and how martial your class is. But I think this is interesting. That's an interesting way to do that. And it sounds like with this advanced combat action, you actually get more, which is pretty cool, so long as you have a little bit of time to kind of spike your arrows into the ground, which I think just sets would just be a cool scene to watch Muteos do something like that, right? Especially because he's an assassin, and maybe he could pick off a whole party before they even know he's there. So with arrows so arrayed, your rate of fire improves as follows, basically by 1 step, right? So it improves from 3/2 to 2/1, or 2 attacks per round, which is a lot. 2 attacks per round improves to 5 every 2 rounds. So 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, which is a lot. And if you have 5/2 already, because you have, I think maybe the only way to get that would be having a missile weapon that gives you a 3/2, and then you have grand weapon mastery maybe, or you have weapon mastery and you're a high level, you'd have 5/2, and that would improve to 3/1, 3 shots in a round. One thing to note there is it sounds like a lot, and it is a lot of potential damage. You could miss with those, but one thing to note with ranged attacks in Hyperborea is, unlike something like 5th edition, you wouldn't apply your dexterity modifier to the damage as well. So a lot of like effective archers or ranged rogues in 5th edition, enjoy getting like a 1d8 for their longbow plus 5 from their 20 dexterity, something like that. The damage is a little bit decreased in this because you're not applying it to missiles, unless it's a hurled weapon or thrown weapon, in which you would apply the strength modifier, if you have one, strength damage modifier. You have to have pretty high strength to get a strength damage modifier, however. And I may be speaking out of turn, but I think maybe you only get that damage to short range, not the longer ranges. I might just be misremembering or conflating systems. So conservative fighting, which basically means fighting defensively. This one's pretty cool. And again, available to what, everyone? Yeah. So this would be great. Like you find yourself, you're a wizard or a pacifist cleric. You find yourself in melee. You may want to do something like this, gain +1 AC in exchange for -2 to hit. If you're not too concerned about dealing a lot of damage with your quarterstaff, you really just want to defend, you might do this. Or you might even do dodge, where it's the combatant forfeits all attacks in order to get +2 AC. This action can be used in conjunction with a cautious, that is half a move, fighting withdrawal. So you can put your put up your dukes, and actually that's not the right analogy, right? Put up your dukes means you're prepared to fight. So anyway, you can dodge. One interesting thing, as an aside, is that one thing I love about some systems, and the most recent one we played was Spyhander RPG, which I believe is almost entirely inspired by 1st edition Warhammer RPG, which I've never played. But one thing I really like about that is that the damage dice for all weapons, I think without exception, is a die 6. But the reason you choose one weapon over another is its abilities, or I think called qualities. So, and this system, the damage dice do change, which I think is a better decision. But this system also does something similar in that melee weapons have various, well, they're not called out explicitly, but like maybe qualities is a good term for it, right? So if you look at these descriptions, it will explain it. But this little table here of annotations explains it. Let me just give you a good example. Our magician at the table, played by Justin, and his name is Nick Savar the Pale. He's an old age Hyperborean magician with a white cat familiar named Sneer, and he wields a quarterstaff, which is this little back and forth arrow. If you look at this, you actually get +1 AC versus melee attacks when it's wielded in two hands, which is a great little, which makes sense. You've got this staff you can actually primarily use for like what, walking and blocking, right? You're not going to do, I don't know, maybe you would do a lot of damage with the staff. It looks like it's a die 6, but he's not going to be seeking out melee as a wizard, right, with 3 hit points. So when he has this, it's actually a good little bonus for him. So as that tangent. Now, we could go one tangent right into another tangent, as I'm wont to do, because one question I have, maybe we can figure this out together, right? Maybe that's another video, is do you need 1 or 2 hands free to cast a spell in this system? I think it's actually 2. So I suppose that if the magician was casting a spell, he would declare magic, and so he would go 3rd in the combat sequence. And I think what that implies is that he has put his staff aside or tucked it under his arm or something and is using both hands to execute the spell. And I think what that means is that, he doesn't just wait until that portion of the combat sequence and then executes the magic. I think what he's doing is while people are getting their stationary melee attacks and their missile melee attacks, he's actually doing this, the entire time and making his somatic components or whatever they call it in this system. I think, so what that means would be that he wouldn't benefit from this +1 while casting a spell all the way up until that point of combat when magic goes off. And then subsequent to that, like any of the movement phase, whether it's movement or movement plus attack or movement plus missile attack, then he could basically have the staff back in hand. So effectively, this helps him part of the time, maybe when he's not casting. Anyway, let me know if your understanding is different than that, but I think that's how sort of magic is considered, is that you're actively casting until the spell goes off. And then at that point, Nixabar could put this quarterstaff back in both hands and benefit from his +1 to AC. Tangent over. All right, let's go back to advanced combat actions. We are looking at conservative fighting and dodge. Now we're going to go back and look at disarm. So disarm, anyone can try this, even Nixabar with his quarterstaff. The combatant sacrifices one attack to attempt to disarm opponent. So just to kind of clarify, so if you had 3 over 2 and it was your second consecutive round of attacking and you have 2 attacks available to you, you could make 1 regular attack to try to deal damage, and then that second one you could trade out for a disarm attempt. Disarm, you roll a die 20 against their AC, modified according to their attacker's weapon. -4 to hit for most weapons, just because this isn't easy to do, right? You're targeting like a specific thing that someone's holding and they're probably wielding it around or parrying. It's not a stationary target, nor is it as big of a target as the person themselves. So you have -4 to most weapons, -3 for axes, halberds, and picks. They're probably bigger, easier to hit. -2 for a flail, likely because it's got the dangly bit, the chain or the strap there that maybe you could easily tangle up. And then -1, or it's getting progressively easier to disarm, essentially, is what we're saying, for a chain whip, fighting net, or whip, which are basically floppy rope-like weapons, which can be more easily disarmed, apparently. A further -2 to hit penalty applies if the target's weapon is gripped with 2 hands. Right. So in a lot of cases in this system, modifiers to an attack or modifiers to AC don't stack. And we can take another tangent to go and talk about some examples there. But to finish this one out, essentially, if I'm wielding a flail and you're trying to disarm my flail, you would roll your attack, roll your die 20, and modify it according to I'm using a flail, so -2, and you would put a further -2 if I've got that flail in both hands. So you'd be rolling at a -4. All penalties considered. If a hit is scored, the target must make a test of strength or drop their weapon, which goes a random number of feet in a random direction, which is pretty cool. I like this. 2 die 6 feet in, 1 die 8 in any direction. The referee may need to assign dice of strength for 2. Okay, we talked about dodge. Double arrow shot, which requires weapon mastery bow. So our friend Mateos, who is an assassin, will never get access, essentially, to weapon mastery because it is not a fighter subclass. So this is not something he would ever be able to do, so far as I understand. despite his love for ranged assassination style combat. So a master archer, and it even calls that out for you here, that's helpful, knocks and shoots 2 arrows at the same time. The target must be within 6 to 30 feet, which is point blank range. One attack roll is made at a -2, effectively negating the +2 to hit bonus associated with point blank shooting, right? So what they're calling out here is that if you're in point blank range, you would normally get a +2 to that, but the single attack roll for both arrows is made at a -2, which effectively neutralizes that. And if it hits, both arrows hit. If it miss, both arrows miss. This maneuver can be used about once per round. And then what's implied here is you do 2 arrows worth of damage. Now, I think how I would rule this, and I think probably how it's intended, is that the total damage you would do is a die 6 for the first arrow, a die 6 for the second arrow, and then plus any dexterity. Actually, we just covered that we don't apply dexterity. Let's say there's some other modifier there. I think you wouldn't apply that to each arrow, is my point. So if there's some other modifier there, I suppose, unless it's a magic arrow modifier. So let's run through a couple of permutations here, and you tell me what you think. If, let's say, the bow is magical, but the arrows are not. I think what that means is that you would shoot, and you do a die 6 plus a die 6, so those 2 arrows, plus 1 for a +1 bow. And so that would be 2 die 6 plus 1 damage. I think if it was a regular bow and magical arrows, let's say each +1 arrows, you do 1 die 6 plus 1 plus 1 die 6 plus 1, so effectively 2 die 6 plus 2, total damage. I may be missing something there with regard to whether magical bows apply the enhancement bonus to both the attack and the damage. Nonetheless, I think it's reasonable. It's a reasonable way of thinking about this. Is really straightforward, and I like it a lot. Unfortunately, no one is going to be a weapon master of this bow in this campaign, so we won't see it in action. And I'm sure I could figure out kind of the minutia around magic and damage there. Double feint. Melee combatants, I've not read this one yet. It's interesting. We've got a few more to go here. We got a lot to go. And be with me for a while today. I'm going to pick up the pace here. Would love to talk about critical hits and misses at some point too. It's one of my favorite features from just old school style D&D in particular, like the deadliness of critical hits. But in particular, I love, as an aside, DCC or Dungeon Crawl Classic RPG critical hits and fumbles tables. They're so flavorful, random, chaotic, and they're sensible, meaning like a higher level and more martial character fumbles less and less severely, and crits more severely. So this has that to some degree, but not actually. I'll put that tension away. Double feint. A melee combatant feints 2 convincing blows so that an opponent becomes more susceptible to a 3rd actual blow. The attacker must roll 2 die 6 modified by their dexterity attack modifier and a charisma reaction adjustment. So let's look at the requirement here first off. Okay, there's no requirement for double feint. Anyone can do this. So this is interesting. So it's partially your dexterity, partially your reaction adjustment to determine your success here. So the person who's feinting will roll 2 die 6. Modified by attack modifier from dexterity and reaction adjustment from charisma. If the result is 10 or greater, so it's just a flat target number, the actual attack may be rolled at a +2 to hit. So otherwise, an attack is lost. Okay, so there's some risk to this. There's a cost here. Note that this technique may not work against the same foe more than once, per referee discretion. 2, or also the bonus applies to a single target. Right. Interesting. Okay. So you fake someone out and you get a bonus to hit them. Why would you not always do that? So if you have... Oh, I see. Okay. So if you have sufficient charisma and dexterity, you could get away with that a good amount of the time. So, okay. So that's not super easy to afford. 2 die 6 is 2 to 12. So a 10 is actually pretty hard to hit. Let's say you've got a +1, which represents pretty good rolls, right? 15 or 16 or so. So that's, you still have to get an 8 on that. So that's, it's an interesting choice. If you're very dexterous and charismatic, and you really want to make sure that hit lands, you could do this. When I first read this, that an opponent can become susceptible to a third actual blow, I kind of thought this would work out to where essentially what I'm doing is setting you up to be hit by my friend. But it looks like it's actually just like I don't actually do any other blows or any other. I don't have to spend any number of attacks. I just am affecting my single attack here at +2. Okay, interesting. Firing March. I have not read this one. This technique is available to fighters and their subclasses. Okay, so that's probably listed here in the prerequisites. Yep, fighter or subclass only. It allows a missile shooter to fire missiles whilst making half moves. That's interesting. So you're moving along, firing. Lesser combatants, which are non-fighters, need to stop and set their feet. Right. So our friend Mateos, the assassin, he's deadly, but he's a lesser combatant and not a trained fighter. He has to stop in order to shoot. Furthermore, if the optional last strike rule is used, a qualified missile shooter may take a full move and fire a single shot at the end of the round. Okay. Indirect fire. So this is available only to a master, which is generally only fighters, of bow and sling, but not crossbowmen. Okay, interesting. The shooter may be positioned behind cover, or the shooter have other obstacles to contend with. In either case, an arching shot is fired at a -2 or greater, depending on the size of the obstruction. Indirect fire is a good way for archers and slingers to avoid possibly shooting allies, so long as allies are not actively engaged with the melee target. Otherwise, firing into melee rules apply. So essentially, this is a way to, is it saying that they're sort of arcing the arrow or arcing the shot? I know that that's possible with, again, master bowmen. And it makes sense, therefore, why you couldn't do it with a crossbow. Crossbow is always a direct shot. You can't quite manipulate it. You could probably manipulate it with a sling as well. So with bowmen or slingers may be behind cover, so they're shooting around cover or other obstacles, and they get a -2, and they're trying to avoid shooting their allies otherwise, and they, so long as those allies are not actively engaged with their target, otherwise you have to follow the firing into melee rules. Okay, maybe it's situationally useful. Offhand weapon parry. Now this is a cool one that really anyone can do. And I think Mateos, our friend Mateos, is doing this. I think he's using a scimitar or falcata in one hand, and then what is it, man gauche, or like a small dagger designed for parrying in the other hand. But it's straightforward. Combatant wields an offhand weapon. It has to be weapon class 1. I guess if there's a weapon class 0, I would allow that too. Maybe unarmed is the only weapon class 0. I'm not sure. To parry melee weapon attacks, but not missiles. You can't quite parry a missile unless you're a monk, maybe. This technique provides a +1 AC bonus. The combatant can continue to attack with the primary weapon as normal and without penalty. So basically, it's like sword and board. You're basically getting a small weapon in the offhand to parry with, getting the equivalent of a small shield bonus. But if you do use the offhand weapon to attack, then you probably wouldn't get that bonus. Yeah, so, but the offhand weapon, with the except Atana or hand trident, which I think is a Psi, good old Raphael weapon, cannot be used to attack in the same round it used to parry. So that is, you could totally have a larger weapon and a smaller weapon and alternate between rounds doing offhand weapon parry and not getting an extra attack but a bonus to AC, and then the next round used 2-weapon fighting, so you get a couple of attacks. Very cool potential setup combos. Let's look at 2-weapon fighting just to see if that's okay. So 2-weapon fighting is available to anyone with 13 or greater dexterity. Out of curiosity, I'm going to check Mateos. Not the most dexterous thief. He's only got a 12 dexterity, so he actually could not do that. Poor Patrick the Elder rolled probably the worst at the table, but his character is really compelling, and I really want to see the assassinate ability in action. Okay, let's keep going. Parry and block. A combatant armed with a melee weapon or shield forgoes attacking to focus on deflecting enemy blows. A melee weapon cannot be used to defend against missile attacks, though a shield can be. This technique provides a +2 AC bonus, which is huge. And if you already have a shield in hand, that's a pretty big bonus. Adjusted by the defender's strength attack modifier, if applicable. That is massive, right? So as, for example, 18 strength yields a total of +4 AC, whereas 3 strength provides no defense whatsoever, right? Because your 3 strength has a penalty and it's pulling this -2 down to 0. Is that right? It is -2 penalty? Seems like it would be more than that. Nope, -2. 3, damage adjustment, or sorry, yeah, 2 hit, -2. Where are we at? Advanced. Here we are. Okay. So if you have sword and board going on, you can forego your attack and just pure defense. So this is basically like dodge, but literally instead of dodging, you're parrying, and you can kind of only do it when you have a shield on. So this is very awesome. Very awesome. This probably doesn't have any kind of requirement though, right? Yep, anyone can do this if you're sword and boarding. If the assailant scores a natural 20, the defender's weapon or shield is broken, unless it is magical. Magical parrying devices have a 1 in 6 chance to, okay, got it. So this is really cool. And even in the case where you get a critical hit or a natural 20, if you may not be using the optional critical hit rules, if they always hit you, meaning you get a natural 20, which is possibly a crit, instead your shield or weapon, you can just let it break. And it's probably your choice as to which one you want to make, or the referee's discretion, whatever. But that's great. So if you want to go pure defense and you already have a sword and board, you could be rocking, and you have, likely if you have a sword and board, you're a fighter, and you're likely, hopefully, you'll have a strength bonus, and that's a really strong option. Parrying block can be used in conjunction with cautious move, fighting withdrawal. So cautious move meaning half move, fighting withdrawal. That's another great combination. Again, if you're withdrawing, chances are you don't want to fight anymore and don't want to get hit. So this is a great one. Pommel strike. It's so cool to have these little optional things like pommel strike. Okay, so this is interesting. So maybe this is like a instant knockout kind of a thing, right? So you can only do this if you've surprised someone, I think is how I read that. To knock out an unsuspecting opponent using the pommel of one's weapon or a similar object. This maneuver is used against an unaware human or humanoid opponent lacking headgear. Okay, if you wear a helmet, you're getting a little bit of passive protection here. The surprise attack is at a +4 to hit as the target is unaware and considered prone, which is +4 to hit. If the target's AC is beaten by 5 or more, so you've got to hit them really good, not just barely graze the back of their skull, the victim is knocked senseless or stunned for 1d6 rounds. And again, stunned is you can just kind of stagger around, and you've got, I think, a -4 to AC. We can double check that. For 1d6 rounds, unless a transformation saving throw is made. Regardless, the hit delivers 1d2 hit points of damage plus strength bonus if applicable. So you could... Okay, so it doesn't seem like this is an option to actually straight up knock someone out, so much as it is to stun them. However, in the narrative, that person is basically sort of stumbling around like this, and you could probably then subdue them quite easily, right? Especially if you've got an ally at the ready. All right, so ready shooter can be done by anyone. The next few can be done by anyone. Ready shooter, reckless fighting, recumbent fire. A lot of great options here. We're only halfway through. That's going to be like a 20-minute video. Ready shooter. If a shooter enters combat with a crossbow cocked, so only crossbow you can do this? Oh, sorry, an arrow knocked or a wand aimed. Oh, so you can do this with wands as well. Then the weapon can be discharged, then the weapon can be discharged before any other actions are taken regardless of initiative results. That is cool. So again, a lot of different options. You kind of need to know what's available, like what's at play. If you're an archer and you don't know about ready shooter or arrow setting, you're doing yourself a disservice. So I think reading about these advanced combat options is such a great thing to just know what's available to you, right? You might organically think to do those things anyway if you're just creative or have played a lot of games, but to know that there's mechanics to support that and benefit from it is even better. And it's also helpful for the DM because I don't have to like come up with what might be the benefit, right? I can just refer to these rules. Okay, so ready shooter. If you're ready, you can shoot regardless of initiative results. If more than one side has a ready shooter, the results are determined in order of highest dexterity, or they happen simultaneously. After this advanced combat action is executed, the standard combat sequence is followed with no cost to the participating characters. I think what this means, that no cost to the participating characters, means like, you know, just because you got your shot off, you had that shot ready, that single attack ready. It was already, you know, your quarrel or bolt was already in your crossbow, and you can do your turn per usual, and so get another attack, say. This maneuver is available prior to the first round of combat alone and cannot be performed by surprised shooters. Okay, so that's another important note. If you have a crossbow bolt in your crossbow and it is ready, but you're surprised, you're not getting that first free attack. Note, although a crossbowman can walk about the dungeon labyrinths with a weapon cocked and loaded, a bow will be ruined if constantly drawn taut, not to mention how exhausting this practice can be. Perfectly reasonable. Reckless fighting. Sounds like what we get with our Raging Barbarians in 5th edition. A melee combatant elects to fight recklessly with less regard for personal safety, gaining a +1 to hit, -2 to AC. Given the relatively low hit point total, even at higher levels in this game, -2 for a benefit of only +1 doesn't seem like a good trade-off. But maybe if you really want to make sure you get the hit in for some critical scenario, that's a useful option. So recumbent fire, I think, also does not require any kind of prerequisite. The shooter lies flat on his back, so firing sort of, you know, through your feet, I guess. You're laying flat on your back or chest and fires a single shot. Okay, so you can only get one shot. An archer must shoot off to the left if right-handed, but a crossbowman suffers no such restriction. Little clauses like that, they add a lot of flavor. It seems like minutia. Maybe it would be hard to remember, but I like this notion here. Like if you're right-handed archer, you're not going to be able to do this to your right? Anyway, whilst laying flat, a recumbent shooters gain +2 AC bonus versus enemy missile fire, but their own bow shots are at a -4 to hit, and their own crossbow will be at a -2 to hit. Okay, and that makes sense too, because you need a little bit of okay, I think that makes sense why a crossbow is easier to do that with. Note that a master archer suffers only -2 instead of the -4, and master crossbow only suffers -1, so half as much if you're a master. Should an enemy come upon a recumbent shooter, he is considered prone. Terrain can inhibit or even prohibit this technique's application. This is kind of cool. It's like, hey, I want to still keep fighting or firing, but I need to get flat and kind of, because there's a lot of incoming missile fire maybe or something, and I'm going to +2 to AC. And I can only shoot one direction. I got a -4 to hit, or maybe -2 if I'm a master, but I'm getting some defense. Kind of cool. Running dodge, a combatant whose movement is 40 or greater can gain a +2 bonus versus enemy missile fire by ducking, zigzagging, and generally moving erratically. So I guess this is only available to people who are pretty fleet of foot. I mean, the average is 40, but a lot of people are wearing armor, right? So that's decreasing that. So if you're basically an unarmored, unencumbered humanoid, you could do this. Sorry, let me just double check. You don't have to have a special thing. Okay, yeah. So this is the only prerequisite as covered. Anyone could reasonably try a running dodge, +2 AC. The running dodger loses half of their total running movement distance, and no other action may be taken. No attacks, item use, or the like. Example: a lightly armored fighter, so lightly armored is still at full 40-foot movement, will not cover a total distance of 80 feet during normal running during a running dodge, but instead 40 feet, right? So you're basically spending your whole turn running, at your full speed, but you're running in a zigzag manner. So you're covering half the ground in one general direction, but you're zigzagging a lot in order to get a +2 AC bonus. Again, a bunch of cool little options of if I want to get a little bit of defense here, I get a little bit of certainty to hit attack here. Really great spread of options here. So saddle casting, probably have to have some kind of saddle casting, mount walking. Okay, so I think that means you're walking your mount along. I'm not sure. A sorcerer can cast a spell from the saddle of a moving. Okay, so I'm wrong. What is mount? Oh, your mount is walking. Duh. Okay, so your mount isn't galloping, say. I figure things out occasionally, eventually too. Regardless of the movement rate of your mount, this technique is best employed when he's walking or moving half speed. To fire the spell, the sorcerer must roll 4d6 against the spell's associated attribute. Interesting. So intelligence for magician. So let's take Nixabar, our Hyperborean, our old age Hyperborean magician with an intelligence of 18. So he's rolling a 4d6 against that. So the spread there being 4 to 24. And if the score is equal to or less, right, so if you have a higher intelligence, you're more likely to succeed, then the spell fires as normal. If the score is greater than the associated attribute, then it's lost. So this makes sense. You're trying to do a spell, which is generally done stationary, on the back of a mount who's going at a reasonable speed, in a reasonable volume. Saddle fire. So this is probably something similar, but for bowmen. For sake of time, I'll keep going. I think it's probably, we could guess at how this works. Shield bash. A combatant bearing a shield may opt to use it as a blunt weapon, does a little bit of damage. When using a shield as an investment, the combatant no longer gains AC. That's pretty much exactly what I expected it to be. Minor damage, extra attack, but no AC. Shield bind. This just sounds cool. I don't know what this is. A combatant gambles an attack by using his or her shield to constrain an opponent's shield. Oh, so you're sort of wrapping up his shield with yours. And a 50% chance, basically, for clerics and thieves, and a 4 in 6 chance for fighters. The shield binder pins an opponent's shield, effectively eliminating both combatants' AC bonuses derived from shield. That is cool. If successful, the binder can take an immediate attack. Otherwise, no other actions may be taken for the round. The shield bind can be held for as many rounds as the combatant has fighting ability levels. That is also cool. So that's one way in which your fighting ability, which is normally, I think it starts at 1 and pretty much just goes up 1 per level, or maybe start at 0 for magician, something like that. That's one way that this thing is directly applicable to combat beyond being able to hit people more easily. If the defender backpedals, however, the binder may pursue to hold on to the shield, but movement rates should be compared. So this is similar to the backpedaling, fighting withdrawal thing that we talked about earlier. We've got to compare movement rates and how much movement you have left over. But this is really interesting. You know, how I would want to use this is I would want to bind up a shield. Of course, I get a free attack, which is great. So I'm basically using my I'm using my attack to bind their shield and get an attack. That's really great. I mean, yeah, I'm going to lose that attack, but I could have missed with that attack anyway. So I have a pretty good chance. I have a 4 in 6 chance as a fighter. So if I was a fighter, I would tie up their shield, get that free attack, but then I'm helping my ally who may be flanking this guy, and flanking is a +1 bonus. So now I've effectively given, let's say that my enemy has a large shield, which is +2 AC. I've effectively given my flanking ally a +3 bonus, +1 from flanking, +2 essentially from no shield, to be able to hit the guy. So that's a really interesting one. I've actually never seen that one in any other game that has a bunch of these kind of combat actions. Shield cover for ally probably is exactly what it sounds like. It's also a cool option. Shield splitter. Wow, a lot of shield stuff. A master hand axe hurler can intentionally destroy an opponent's shield on a short range throw if the attack roll exceeds their AC by 4. Very cool little thing. Like, I would read this and then I would just make a barbarian based on this concept who just brings like 4 throwing axes on his belt and then a huge, great axe or something. I would always lead in the attack by running up and throwing a hand axe, trying to break someone's shield and then coming in for the kill once they no longer have AC. Very cool stuff. I'm really excited about combat in this game based on kind of all these little options here. Let's back up here. All of these shield ones, you probably have to be able to use shields. Yeah. So Saddlefire was fighter or subclass training required. So all the shield ones require shields allowed by your class. Some classes, mostly magicians, cannot use shield. Many of the thieves can though. And then shield splitter must be weapon mastery of axes, which it said. So that makes sense, right? So if you're practiced at splitting people's shields, you're probably a master of that weapon. So we're going to move on then to shield wall, which requires 3 or more combatants with large shields. So in my particular group of players, I don't think any of the this is not going to happen because I don't think they're using large shields, and I don't think any more than 2 of them have shields. But could be a really cool scene to watch unfold if it did happen. So 3 or more large shield users overlap their shields in close order. They each gain +4 AC bonus. That's huge. Normally a large shield gives you +2 versus all attacks. The shield wall can advance at half movement while in this formation, so it's slowly pushing forward, right? You can imagine like 8 guys doing this versus like 8 other guys and kind of fighting this. It'd be kind of cool. The shield bearers also can attack with spears, long tridents, or other one-handed piercing weapons of weapon class 2 or greater within reason. What I like about this is that if you're using the optional first strike rule and you've got a shield walled up a group of guys all with spears, you're like, what are you going to do? I mean, that's the whole, testudo formation of Roman phalanxes, where they would kind of turtle up and just like have these have these spears behind a shield wall. It's really hard to penetrate. If the shield wall forms a first rank of a phalanx, then the second rank of halberdiers, pikemen, spearmen, etc. enjoy the same AC bonus, but attacks on -2 penalty. Makes sense. They're in a second rank behind, trying to reach over or around or under without hitting their friends. The second rank, however, cannot outnumber the first rank. Makes sense. Yeah, you have to have enough shields to cover the same or less number of guys. Spear charge. I'm for whatever reason partial to shield and spear. Always have been, and on 100% of the time that me and my buddies would play Valheim, I was the spear guy. So I'm happy to see a lot of shield stuff and a lot of, well, at least a couple spear things here. And in fact, when you look at the one disappointing thing for some systems is like a lack of spear variety. Like there's just like spear. But there could be a lightweight spear that you'd use in one hand. There could be a versatile one you could use in one or both hands. And then, of course, like a great spear we use only with 2 hands, or a pike, halberdier, or I'm going to butcher these French names, like a bec de corbin or guisarme or something like that. All those old school, weapons you'd find. Second edition AD&D black cover book. I just was like marveling at all the different kinds of pole arms there were. So in this, like spear, let's see, there's a lance type of a spear, javelin as well. And then there's spear short, spear long, spear great, spiked staff. Don't know how that's different than a spear. Is the spike going up or is the spike going to the side? I have no idea. Yeah, so tangent about spears over. Returning to advanced combat actions. We're almost done, folks. Spear charge could be cool. If you charge with a spear or a spear-like thing, 15 feet, like a normal charge. The charge cannot be performed with terrain like a normal charge. If the spear charger scores a 19 or 20 and such attack roll qualifies as a hit, the damage dice are doubled, in effect replacing the +2 standard from the charge die. If the attack roll is less than 19, but still qualifies as a hit, then the standard +2 bonus applies. Always note that a charger suffers a -2 penalty, like the regular charge. I'm actually failing to understand how this is different than just any other charge. We'll go back and clarify. Note, if the optional critical hit rolls are used, a natural 20 is rolled, fighters have a 2 in 6 chance of scoring triple damage instead of double damage. Clerics, etc., etc. So how is this different than the non-advanced combat option called charge? So charge attack, so bear with me here, maybe it's obvious to you, it's not obvious to me. A running attack, 1 attack, reasonably straight, 15-foot distance, +2 to damage, -2 to AC, and a note on last strike. So if we go back to this one. Okay, so is it that it's easier to hit because it's a 19 or a 20? I think that's all it is. Easier to land a spear charge attack. For time's sake, I'm gonna move on. Let me know if I got that wrong. Let me know if you've ever skewered someone using a spear charge attack. Sounds cool. I would try it. Spear setting. This is great. So setting a spear against a charge or against some other kind of attack, wherever that's relevant. I love the notion that you can think in these terms outside of like a lot of systems where it's just like I attack, I attack, I attack. You're just rolling dice boringly, round over round. Okay, so non-surprise defender who wins initiative can set a spear-like weapon against a charging enemy. But the butt of the weapon is fixed firmly, and you brace it with your foot or knee, just like in real life. If the defender hits a charger, damage dice are doubled. If the optional first strike is ruled, the spear setter may go before the charger, even if initiative was lost, right? So first strike, I love that rule. If this maneuver may be used against charging monsters if it feels like the circumstance is appropriate. For example, yeah. So awesome. It's exactly what I expected it to be. Throw and attack. Okay. Just more reason for me to make an axe throwing barbarian type warrior, I think. Let's read it. I'm making assumptions about what this does. A fighter who enters combat already wielding a hurling weapon in hand and cocked, so you're ready to go, can hurl the weapon and close to attack with a readily accessible melee weapon or charge. Okay, so I get a free attack basically. Is that right? Why would I would always do this. This maneuver functions as a sort of free attack before distance closes. But if initiative is lost and enemies close in on the hurler first, the opportunity is gone. So you may have it ready, but you dropped the initiative. This advanced combat action also may be used in conjunction with spear charge. Example, oh, that's really cool. Yeah, okay. So you may throw, excuse me, one may throw a hand axe and charge him with a short spear to devastating effect. Also, if the optional last strike is rules, yep, you can do it at the end. Okay, very cool. 2-weapon fighting. A lot of systems make this difficult or basically not worth it. Let's see how this one goes. A combatant with 13 or greater dexterity. That's the prerequisite. I neglected to check the prerequisite of these last couple. Let's look into that. So we know shield wall, you have to have 3 or more people with large shields. Spear, anyone can do those. And the last two will be throw and attack, fighter or subclass only, which makes sense. I think you can really only effectively do that if you're really well trained in a martial class. And then the last one is 2-weapon fighting. And then I swear I'll let you go. 13 or greater dexterity. Makes sense. You fight with a weapon in each hand in order to gain 1 extra attack per round. The following rules apply. The player must designate a primary weapon and a secondary weapon. Okay. Neither weapon may be larger than weapon class 2. Let's take a quick gander. Let's gander the goonder of the weapons and see what kind of example weapons are weapon class 2. So they're not sorted by class, but we can see here something like falcata, daggers, clubs, light clubs, even a battle axe. Okay. Weapon class 2. Warhammer, weapon class 2. So you get some beefy weapons here, right? So javelin, long scimitar, broadsword, longsword. So you have a good range of things you could do this with. I guess what that means is I could use like 2 broadswords and dual wield them. Seems powerful. I should suggest this to someone in my party and then kill them. All right. If both weapons are 1, okay, so the smaller the weapons, easier. This makes sense, and I really like that. So if both weapons, not just one, are WC1, weight class or weapon class 1, I think, all attacks are at -2 to hit. So you get an extra attack, but it's at -2 to hit because they're both small weapons. If one of them is WC1 and the other is WC2, so I've got a battle axe in one and a dagger in another, they're at -3 to hit. Might want to do that. I might want to take that -3 penalty to both of them because battle axe is going to do more damage. If both weapons are -2, like the example I gave, 2 broadswords, then both are at -4. Probably would never want to do this beyond the -2 because even the -2 is pretty hefty. But a warrior, a fighter who has weapon mastery, maybe he's level 4 or 5, could probably pretty easily get past that with his increased, fighting ability and potentially bonuses from strength or weapon mastery or grand weapon mastery. So could be very cool. 2-weapon fighting may be attempted by, so it's dexterity. Okay, so it's not based on dexterity, but dexterity is a requirement. Okay. So even a beefy strength-based fighter could do this effectively. Just he has to be dexterous as well as strong. Maybe attempted by characters who already enjoy multiple attacks per round. Okay, this is where it's probably going to get a little complex, but basically you're going to get an additional attack. So let's see how this plays out, and then that's it for advanced combat options. 2-weapon fighting may be attempted by characters who already has multiple attacks, except for monks using the empty hand. I never liked monks, so we're just going to skip right over that. We're going to pretend that this book never said that. Consider the following adjustments. A combatant with 1 attack now has 2, primary and secondary. A combatant with 2 attacks now has 3, primary, secondary, primary. A combatant with 3 attacks now has 4, primary, primary, secondary, primary. I don't see any reason why you'd have to go in these particular orders. I imagine you might want to change it up or do secondary, primary, 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 or primary, 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 secondary. Because you may have different attributes for these weapons. You may have different targets that you want to apply those attributes to. Like maybe you have a flail and you want to get around someone's shield with your primary attack, assuming that's a weapon class that's legal here, 2 or less. Anyway, in all such permutations, the second offhand weapon is utilized but once. So in effect, even if you get 1,000,000 attacks per round, you're only ever benefiting from 1 additional offhand weapon attack. And that is awesome. Thanks for watching the Doomed Wyvern Gaming Guild.